I do not eat tomatoes. Like, come November, it's over. I don't eat tomatoes. Gross. They're disgusting. But I'm hoping Glen can fix that, which is why I kept bringing it up. Glen, please fix the tomatoes.
Please fix the tomatoes.
The tomatoes are bad. Enough with Arabidopsis. No one cares. Tomatoes. Hey, welcome back to Approximately Correct. I'm Alona Fyshe.
And I'm Scott Lilwall. Great to be back with you here, Alona. I did have a question for you because I know that you are a gardener.
I am.
And we're kind of getting to the fallish kind of like harvest time. So how's your garden doing?
Yeah, so as we're recording this, the tomatoes are tomatoing. I got some beautiful orange pumpkins ready to come in any moment now. Yeah, it's been a good year. And my gardens are actually out in the front of my house. So people stop all the time to talk about the garden. And it's been actually a really fun way to get to know the neighbors.
Are you in there all the time? Like, how do you get them to grow?
Well, actually, this year I put in an irrigation system, automatic irrigation system. So it gets watered at 5:30 in the morning. I'm still sleeping. And the water turns on and waters those plants. So I got to get AI hooked up to that somehow.
Yeah.
The AI should figure out when to turn on the water.
We recently learned that timing is very important when it comes to how plants grow. And
Indeed.
we learned that from our guest today, Glen Uhrig. He is a professor at the University of Alberta, and he studies plant biochemistry and genes and what helps plants grow the best.
Mm-hmm.
And artificial intelligence is actually a big part of that, we learned.
Yeah, because there's a lot of sort of knobs to tune. That's a great place where AI can help.
Yeah. So here's our conversation with Glen.
Glen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we've been really excited to get you here to talk about your work because I saw you at Upper Bound this year. You did a great presentation, and I was like, I want to know more immediately. Let's get him on.
So some of the stuff that we're investigating that I presented there is being taken on by some grads and undergrads in the lab, looking at how we can discern differences between plants just on basic imaging information, and also expanding some of that imaging information to different modalities, so taking different types of images. We've really kind of embraced this idea of using kind of machine learning, computer vision approaches, and seeing where we can integrate it into our research program, see if we can make some differences. So yeah, Upper Bound was a great opportunity, and it was nice to be invited to talk there. I feel like it's something a little bit different, a little more biology maybe than some of the actual machine learning, but it's there's a wide world of applications out there for plant sciences and agriculture to intersect.
Right. And I remember the way I met you was that actually you contacted me because you had this idea for the system that we'll actually talk about today. You were looking for somebody who does computer vision. I don't really do computer vision, but I remember thinking that the application was so cool. So then when we started the AI Everywhere certificate at the university, we had you come be a guest lecturer in the intro class, which was also really cool because we love to showcase the way that AI can impact other fields.
It was really nice to be invited to do that because I like to talk generally about how different spaces can intersect. And that's been one of the most rewarding components of being part of this sort of ecosystem. I was a trained plant biologist and biochemist in grad school. And so coming to computer science through collaboration is actually a lot of fun. So talking in that class and the questions you get from people that come from different areas of research or interests is really informative, and it's nice to have those conversations.
Yeah, totally. And it can help you to think more broadly about your own work, which I think is really cool.
Absolutely. I feel like that's actually a really important thing in science. It's not necessarily always done. People get very fixated on the one thing that they're interested in or that they're focused on doing, but having experiences that go beyond that or intersect with people you don't normally intersect with can really inspire new ideas, like you were saying. And I think that's important to have at a university campus for sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate your dedication to like making sure we have good episodes for this podcast by being like, okay, we'll get these two together and they'll work on something really interesting.
And then later, in 3 years, then they'll be in the podcast. That was always my intention.
Good long game on that one.
Yeah,
I like it.
Well, it's also, part of the reason I love doing this podcast is that it gives me an opportunity to think about different problems that I probably wouldn't, sit down with all of these wonderful people we've had on the podcast and talk to them for an hour. Otherwise, there's a great excuse to do exactly what you just said, think broadly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking about thinking broadly, tell me about your lab broadly.
So my lab seems to dabble with a lot of different things, I will say. So foundationally, we're interested in diel biology. So I'll throw some colloquial terms out there. So diel biology is like how plants do things throughout the day. So they're very in tune to sunrise, sunset, night. They're doing different things metabolically. So how they're growing and aiming towards reproduction. This is all very important things for us to understand from an agricultural perspective because we rely on seeds or plant biomass for different things, right? There's all sorts of industries that spin out of this. And so we're interested in how they're doing those things, how they're regulating those processes. And as a result of that, we like to also observe plants. And that's how we kind of came to intersect with artificial intelligence, broadly speaking, of course, where we started to take a lot of images of plants. And we were saying, well, what can we do with this image data? What can it tell us about these plants? And these are just simple RGB images. That started as a collaboration with a company that spun out of the U of A called G2V Optics. And they're a lighting company. And so they were producing kind of new LED technology. And so we were using their lights and their ability to do special things and then imaging the plants and then just seeing how we can manipulate them. And then ultimately found the idea that twilight, which is dawn and dusk, has actually a fairly substantial impact on the growth and development of plants. There's a lot, this is an active space of research, so we can get into that after, but we kind of came to a similar conclusion as another group independently and found kind of we were developing together, I would say, well, independently, but still as a community, kind of a new understanding of how plants are detecting light and integrating that information for growth and development. And that all foundationally came down to taking pictures of these plants, doing some molecular analyses of them, and really trying to understand, how those things can intersect together to give us information about plant growth and development.
So are you saying that like if we had artificial lights and completely skipped what would be like a twilight lighting situation to plants, that would have an effect on growth?
Yeah. So actually a lot of the science has been done historically due to likely technological limitations. The lights would come on immediately to full and then off. And obviously we know in nature that does not occur, right? So we were trying to get a more nuanced understanding of that, and the technology that G2V developed allowed for this gentle ramping and also the tuning of the spectral composition, so the types of lights that are hitting those plants. And now LEDs are everywhere. They're very energy efficient and they last a long time, and they're very tunable for different wavelengths. And so people are exploring how you can use those for controlled growth environments or horticultural plant productivity, which is a growing space and something that, in Canada here, like if you think of the far north, this has major applications for fresh produce production in remote environments.
And that's interesting because, as somebody who doesn't know a ton about plants, you think like the bright sunlight, the daylight is where most of this would be going on. But I don't think people realize that this dusk twilight area is so important. But that obviously makes sense. It's part of their environment.
Yeah, other than like just being nice to look at, it seemingly has some important information for the plants, and it really has to do with the thresholds of that light energy and the spectral composition of that. And so we just had the same spectral composition for dawn and dusk, but I know there are people in the world that are examining if you do it in exact spectral dawn and spectral dusk for different latitudes, because how the sun radiance hits the earth changes depending on where you are. And seasonality is a very important thing. Light is driving all those things. So plants are very in tune to this. And so we came to this computer vision machine learning thing by using a whole bunch of plants that were deficient in certain genes that detect different light wavelengths. And we started to explore how those intersected with what's called the circadian clock. We have one. Timing our day. That's why you get jet lagged, right? When you travel places, is your body's anticipating certain things and you have to adjust for this.
And there's certain triggers and stuff that in your environment that tell your body.
So plants have a very robust one because the anticipation of daylight is central to their survival and existence. And so photoreceptors will work with other proteins to connect to the circadian clock to inform seasonality and other sort of daily growth and development things. And so there's different thresholds that allow these to be detected to say, are we detecting light or we have enough light to do metabolic things? So anyways, this has kind of helped us create a more nuanced understanding of what plants are doing.
And everything you're saying to me smacks of machine learning and reinforcement learning. You're talking about different spectral qualities, trying to change it, trying to optimize to get those plants to grow. And so is that where you went?
This is where we are going, I would say, for sure, is there is a huge variable space there. And once upon a time, pre-pandemic, I was asked at a conference, because we presented some of this in 2019 at a Plant Canada conference, which brings together a whole bunch of different people from around Canada. Do you think we could grow plants better than they would naturally grow in the wild or in a field? And yes, you bring them into a controlled environment, you can control all the factors, you can grow them better. But I do think that in nature, they're just adapting to what they're presented with. Whereas there's probably different optimas that exist for each plant. We would call those, say, a light recipe that would maximize the productivity of that crop for whatever it is you want to use it for. So be that biomass for leafy greens, everyone's favorite plant, kale, of course, right?
My children, definitely. They ask for kale every night.
They really like kale. Okay, cool. Okay. Because kale has a lot of different flavors, but it's kind of one of these like superfoods, right? And so do you tailor for biomass, or can you tailor for biomass and taste, which is the metabolite compositions, when to harvest it, and there's all these variables.
When you say biomass, you're talking kind of like yields, like how much of it?
Yeah, exactly. As you know, we have this variable climate scenarios where we have some seasons of drought. I mean, kale is fairly robust to a lot of different things, but things might envision things moving inside where you can have more productivity for certain things that you want to have at different times of year, right? So vertical farming, that's an engineering problem as well as a biology, also a reinforcement machine learning problem. How do you optimize these systems to be productive for whatever it is you're growing? And that's definitely where we're kind of interested in going with these things.
I have a personal request.
Sure.
Tomatoes in the winter are terrible. Could you?
In terms of their yield or in terms of their taste?
Taste.
Yes.
And why are they orange and not red? They're sort of pink.
Well, there are people that work on post-harvest research, which is like when you pick things.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't want to be like incorrect on this because you put this out into the world. But like there are people that work on those things. But I think my generalized understanding is that sometimes because you have to transport at large distances, they'll pick them unripe and they will try to have some artificial ripening system as they go.
Reinforcement learning in the truck. Making the
that could be a real possibility because you can expose them to certain compounds and that will help them induce ripening, but it won't be the same as if they're on the plant because you're talking about taste, things like sugar content, and those things really come at certain stages of the fruit development. I don't work on fruits, so I would say like that's my understanding of those things. So if you pick it too early because it's just an economic question, then yeah, they might not taste as great as you're getting them. But we could conceivably grow those things locally in some sort of horticultural system. And there is opportunities there, I think, to drive those things to make those tomatoes the same as you get in the summer. Yeah. So that is a reinforcement learning question that could perceivably answer that.
Right. And how expensive would it be? And so there's lots of questions there.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that you mentioned, vertical farming, like I know a big conversation that's happening right now is like land use and the need for, like we have a lot of needs for land and only a certain amount, but it sounds like it could be the kind of thing where farming takes a lot of space, but maybe there are options where if you can increase yield, I would imagine you also have more control over lighting conditions in more of like a type place.
I mean, it'll never replace like staple crops that we have. So like canola, wheat, barley, oats, like these things that require mass amounts. But specialized things like tomatoes, right? I mean, you can still grow them in fields in your backyard. There is opportunities there for high value crops, let's say, that are like people are very interested in having tomatoes that taste a specific way, right? So it's not like you're just growing fields of tomatoes to go into like some maybe sauce manufacturing scenario. Right. But you want that nice tomato. And so I think there is huge opportunities there. And I do think that, I mean, not to get to, to space travel, but at some point, presumably like we're going to have food or whatever to go out into, as somebody who loves
always want food.
Yeah, they're always food. Yeah. Silly. They don't want to eat food, right? In the space travels. But more realistically would be some of the remote communities of Canada where it's expensive for them to procure those foods because of the logistics of getting it there. You could envision possibly somebody creating, this would require a whole bunch of different expertise, but creating a self-sustaining grow operation where they could have fresh fruits and vegetables there on site and they don't need to be transported there.
Right. And when you can't get the sunlight from outside, then you have to bring it in artificially, which opens up all these opportunities for using machine learning to optimize that. So tell us more about how you're integrating that into your research.
Sure. So we collaborate a lot with people. Because I'm not necessarily coding things myself per se, but I have a lot of students that are interested in these things. And University of Alberta has an outstanding computer science program from what I can tell. Like all the people that have come to my group to answer questions have just incredible skill sets, a lot of motivation. We have large imaging data sets that we can train models on that we've acquired for years of acquiring these images, RGB images. We also acquire a lot of molecular data. So we're really interested about how we can intersect imaging data with underlying molecular changes in a plant. And so there's opportunities for training models on large data as well. And so that's where we're kind of integrating these things together. The reinforcement learning thing, it does more center around collaborating with Adam White in particular, but center around, can we find better ways to grow plants? that we wouldn't have otherwise thought of. I mean, I think I've done lots of training to be a scientist, right? But there's still things that you just wouldn't think about. And it's kind of getting beyond yourself to find new paths forward or new hypotheses that something like AI can come up with. That's, to me, fascinating, just to see what these agents come up with in terms of new hypotheses that we can explore.
Right, and new solutions. Yeah, but something we've heard a lot on the show is that something you might not have thought of that comes out of working with machine learning.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to give kind of an idea of like the impact that it could have if machine learning RL was not an option, how would that change this approach? Like, would this be feasible project to work towards, or?
I mean, we would try.
Yeah.
But it would be it's an infinite variable space, right? So having these things helps you overcome that, it's not really an energy threshold, but it is kind of an energy threshold because you can only brute force through so many variables.
Yeah.
And you will find things, they'll be like incremental, but what we're looking for is like the fastest way to checkmate in the chessboard. Sorry, I don't take credit for that as an atom analogy that we were talking the other day. But essentially, like, what are these paths? And ultimately for me, underpinning that, like, what are the molecular reasons for why that path is the best path?
Right.
So all sorts of discovery. And that can lead to new breeding of new genetics, all sorts of new things, maybe genetics specifically for indoor horticultural growth, but also maybe you find new things that could be for crop breeding for agriculture in the field as well. So
so helping you get to where you want to be faster. And I mean, resources are always limited, especially we're talking about research. So
yeah. And in the agriculture, horticultural space, this to me is, I mean, food is a pressing issue across the globe, right? And so this is something that we need to be able to adapt to. And that's where AI will hopefully not maybe give exact solutions, but get us quicker to solutions. And we need to be doing that for sure. I mean, farmers, different parts of Canada, for example, are suffering drought different years. Like, can we even that is a AI question. It's like, can we predict better into the future in this more variable system that we've got? Can we find more solutions? Can we find the best genetics for those solutions? All of these things are multivariable questions that will require an AI component to help us get to them quicker.
We've talked a little bit about how you kind of started this connection with machine learning. And I mean, that's something we like talking about is this really fascinating. I mean, AI is not siloed. It has a lot of value for other research in other areas like biology, horticulture. So we talked a little bit about how you got connected with people, but was there like a moment that you were like, hey, this is something I really think we need to explore?
I think it started mostly with this one graduate student who I co-supervised with, Dr. Guahilin in U of A Comp Sci, Curtis Kennedy. He is just such an exceptional talent in this space. We immediately were able to communicate biology to computer science, and he indulged me.
How much did you know about AI before you started sort of working in these areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. Practically, not so much. Abstractly, from just like what could be possible, that's probably a little bit more, where I'm like, you can use this to predict things or to discover new trends or correlations that you may not have seen otherwise. And that's kind of where I came into that space, I would say.
So understanding machine learning at that like high level allowed you to think about how it, and then how much have you learned since?
Yeah, a lot. So I'm always quizzing. Yeah, no, I wouldn't go that far. I'm quizzing Curtis and Guahi and Adam on all these things because it's still a little bit abstract to me, but like I get kind of what they're doing and how, machine learning and deep learning and these different kind of approaches to doing things, because we deal with a lot of time series data. So we ended up testing a bunch of models, and obviously deep learning in this case was much better. And that work was published, and then we've gone on to use those things. But it seems like it's just this never-ending expanding space. I think it really took hold for me when you saw like large language models, something like ChatGPT come out. I know everyone talks about ChatGPT, but it was fairly big deal.
Yes.
And it changes how we do our teaching now, how like you can implement it in different ways, debugging code or whatever. There's certain things that it's got really great applications for. But then the same side of me is like, we still need to train people to have some inference capability before they go into the large language model space, right? So it's a tricky teaching and learning.
So have there been any surprises for you throughout learning and including machine learning in your research here?
Yeah, the surprises mostly come from when my group, well, the computer science people in my group and myself get together with Adam's group, I am always so impressed with the types of questions that they ask, because I don't think about science the exact same way. And I love hearing those sorts of questions. It's like, that is really interesting. Like, how did you come to that conclusion? That was probably the biggest surprise. I mean, I would have thought like we would be maybe more siloed, but we're not. We're actually just asking the same question, just different ways, just based on our prior knowledge. I found that as being surprisingly and like happily surprised how engaged people are to try and solve a problem like, can we grow plants better?
And have there been surprises on the science side though? Like, have you learned something about plants you think you might not have?
Yeah. So from the machine learning side of things, some of the work that we already published is that we can trace leaf signatures. So the leaves move throughout the day.
Oh, okay.
So they'll go from being more open to more closed, depending on metabolic state, light intensity, a lot of different factors. But when we screen all these different genetics, so this was with these plants that were deficient in certain photoreceptors that detect, like, say, red light, blue light, so on and so forth. Plants have a whole bunch of
cones in our eyes. They have
exactly. Yeah. And so you can get plants that are deficient in individuals or multiple variable deficiencies. We did the individual ones and we put them under our standard LED twilight, and you can see different signature patterns. And not only can you see it with some, it's pretty obvious, but if you train models on those, they can see things that you don't. And we were able to differentiate between a whole bunch of genetics. And the reason that's important is, like, if you want to say, like, our fields having a problem, in this case, it wouldn't be genetics. You'd have the same genetics in the field. But if you have, like, disease manifesting in one part of your field or drought in another, they will have different signatures. Now, not just in this case, you do hyperspectral imaging where you get a whole bunch of different wavelengths. But you can use the same sort of principle here to say what we were doing with, surprisingly, just with RGB, we can see these different signatures and train models, and they can differentiate those, that now that can be translated easily to other applications as well. So that was very surprising, because this is something very simple. You're just taking literally many pictures of a plant and then training models, and they can predict that this is this genotype and that's that genotype. And you look at them and you're like, I'm not sure what would be different between these.
Yeah, obviously this is kind of early stages, but I mean, it could give you an idea that the plants, like this plant is letting me know it's getting sick. Like,
people are already doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, there would be drones over fields for the most part. A lot of it is drone technology right now, mounted with expensive hyperspectral cameras. So hyperspectral, we're doing RGB. That's 3, red, green, blue.
Yeah.
Hyperspectral would be like thousands of channels or hundreds of channels. And you can see very fine-tuned wavelengths that they would be detecting. And you get these really fancy kind of like predator view sort of to be AI or to be science fiction about it. You can cut this if you want, but I mean, she needs to know everything is relational for me in some way, and so
I'm the worst nerd. I have so little of this. I don't know what you're.
So in that case, it was more infrared, because it was detecting the heat signature of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But in this case, it's the same sort of thing. You can get these, like, how the plants reflect the light or absorb light changes depending on the state that they're in. And you can train models to quickly identify things that are suffering from drought or things that are suffering from disease without actually, if you looked at them both, you wouldn't necessarily know from like your eye standpoint. But with these images and a model, it can tell it very quickly that there's a problem that could be manifesting here. And so they're already doing those sorts of things. And so the long game of this could be, self-sustaining growth environments that would just be managed by the reinforcement learning trained agent with some computer vision involved. And you could have them be like, oh, well, this is looking drought stress, give it more water. Oh, nutrient stress, give it more of this. Disease, we need to remove them from the growth.
Agriculture, like large scale agriculture, is also integrating all of this, robotic tractors and stuff. And like, if they could also have, they do have cameras.
Yeah.
Also detecting that on the fly. There's lots of ways that it could affect even.
It's a really cool intersection of not only just the biology, but like, there's a huge amount of engineering to make things small enough and practical enough to be implemented in those spaces. And then ultimately you need the back end of all the people that can do the reinforcement learning stuff to get the models to be able to predict that is that, and this is this.
We've already seen it in certain areas that there's problems with water shortages and being more efficient with water. And
yeah, that's a big one. That's like probably municipalities, I think, would be probably pretty interested in how water is being used and where it would be most like beneficial to be applied to a field or something like this.
Yeah, that's a big concern, especially we're talking about climate change and things like the patterns farmers and are used to are not the same anymore.
It's not only the broader like variable climate thing, but it's impacting like lives of people.
Yeah.
And if we don't have farmers, I mean, that the whole system kind of crumbles, right? So it's very important that we get the support for them and give them new tools to help be productive into the future.
We talked a little bit about your experience and kind of doing this, but if we could kind of take like a broader view, how do you see artificial intelligence changing research in your area?
Oh, yeah. Hypothesis, like where someone derives hypothesis. So we, as plant scientists, I won't talk specifically about agriculture. Let's talk about fundamental plant science. It's a huge community across the world generating mass amounts of data because it's become cheaper to produce lots of data. Buzz terms would be like genomic data. So you can sequence an organism, to transcriptomic data, which is like the...
which genes are expressed.
Which genes are expressed, exactly. And then proteomic data is my space, and then metabolomic data. So proteomic data is the proteins that do things, they're the functional units of the cell. And then metabolomics is like the process of producing different metabolites. So like taking substrate A and turning it into B, and then B becomes, the flavor in your tomato, for example.
Oh, please.
Yes.
More of that one.
For example. And so like there's huge amounts of data, and we're just generating more and more every day, but a lot of it just gets warehoused and just sat there. And this is where I think there'll be huge opportunities for inclined individuals to get into those publicly available data and derive new hypotheses or train new models. I know people work in large language models. They're using a lot of this like AlphaFold, for example. That was a huge advancement. Now they can do protein docking. So basically finding out if proteins are likely to interact together, which is another huge advancement. So yeah, there's like just a whole bunch of data that just sits unused or minimally in use that could just be taken up by anybody. It's publicly available, and just need a little bit of training about what that data tells you or what it is, and then apply these sorts of principles, and you'd be able to find derive new hypotheses.
So what's stopping people from doing that? Like why aren't they already?
That's a really good question. I think it's a lack of intersectional training. So generally let's say in plants.
You mean of people, intersectional training?
Yeah. So they have the computer skills and the plant skills.
Yeah.
Or the molecular biology skills, let's say. That gap between those two is narrowing for sure. When I started training, it was a huge gap. When I started, like, say, my undergrad, those would not be things that people would be talking about. Like, we use computers to write reports, but like, right? But, for example, and now that's narrowing because it's just become in everybody's world now, right? Young people are exposed to this very artificial intelligence, generally speaking, very young. Coding has become new things, just like coding camps. There's coding, clubs. There's all sorts of things. There's robotic clubs. There's all sorts of cool stuff. And so I think that that's really narrowing that gap. And so it's becoming more accessible to people to access that data now that we've amassed it. So I imagine now it's going to be at some point, like a proliferation of new insights that are going to come from using all this data. Now, if that data is standardized or not, that's where it gets a little bit challenging, but that's where the fields will have to like refine how they're doing things. And I would say now with large data acquisition, more people are interested in standardizing things for that exact purpose so that people can use it to make new inferences.
I would say it's a problem in neuroscience too, that there's like a ton of data, and also we don't like record the stuff about the data consistently. And so it's really hard to combine it. So yeah.
And sometimes you're like, when you record things, you're like, you're in it, kind of what you want it for, but you don't know if there's other parameters that need to be recorded that other people might find important for different purposes, right? So like
hearing you describe it, it sounds like we're talking about what might be a pretty big shift. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. A lot of people are now, we can solve problems with this, and it's become a very exciting time, I think. And that all that data that's out there is just ready to be used to make those inferences, be it in biomedical space, where I think they're probably much more ahead than the plant science and agriculture space. That's just the nature of generally science in general. But it's still the same sort of principles can be applied to any sort of agriculture, plant breeding.
Science in general. I mean, all areas. That's what I love about computer science. Whatever you're interested in, we can do something with computers and that thing. Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, the most exciting thing is really like, how quickly can I get to a new hypothesis, like a gene that I never would have looked at, because even in our model organism of plant that we use, Arabidopsis, there's still things that are just like, we don't know what that does. It just exists. Like a protein with domain of unknown function. Okay. You can't write a grant being like, I want to find out about that. You need
well,
to
you
have some,
can, but nobody would.
no, it wouldn't be funded. Yeah. You need to find like a reason for that. And these sorts of things will sift through all the data to find new and interesting things that you may have come across by accident or just fortuitously. But like, this gives you more rationale, more opportunity to find new and interesting things to figure out biology.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you are a person who has a lot of questions about plants.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know if there's one question that you'd love to solve, and AI maybe can help you solve that. Like, what would you like to know? What's the one burning question?
Oh my goodness. I'm just fascinated by uncovering the underlying like molecular reasons that plants are doing things at different times of day. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds, maybe that's kind of still fairly abstract, but like they're very precise. I mean, we work with a model organism, but you can extrapolate to all other plants because they're just trying to optimize their productivity for reproduction, essentially, right? And growth and development. And so it's really cool to say like, well, why like an hour in are they doing this versus like 2 hours in, they're not doing that anymore? Like, what is the purpose of that for whatever reason? And so that just fascinates me because it's just like a very well-timed machine. And I think people sometimes go out into the world and they're just like, oh, that's a nice tree. But I'm like, that tree is doing very specific things, like right now, right? You know, it's adapting to its environment. It's very much like trying to do the best it can, given the circumstances that it's presented with. And I just find that just fascinating.
Okay. So you want to know the plant routine. You want to know what they're...
exactly. What's its daily routine? What's it doing at 5:15 in the morning versus what's doing at like 5:20? Yeah.
That's important.
For example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the number one thing, I think.
And how can we support that plant in its mission to create tomatoes for me? Right.
Yeah. So exactly. Again, that's where this is going to come in because it really is an infinite space of optimization. And the one thing, I guess, the intersection we didn't talk about yet is like genetics and environment components, right? So we could find the ideal lighting scenario for one type of tomato, give you the perfect tomato in the winter, but then that might not be the tomato you want for whatever it is you're doing at that time, right? Maybe you want a tomato that's more
cherry tomato.
Exactly. Yeah. So then you have to go back and be like, well, these are different genetics. How is that? You might start with the same ideal light condition, but is it still optimal for this one? Mm-hmm. That's where you have to retrain some things and understand again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It was great talking to you. I'm definitely going to be looking at plants now and being like, what are you up to now?
Yes.
Are you a morning plant? Are you a dusk plant? I'm not a morning plant.
And I'm going to be like, tomato.
Yeah. Like, are you hungry? You're really...
No, it's tomato season here in Edmonton as we're recording this. And I am a gardener. And every year I grow a weird tomato. And this year I'm growing a tomato that's like, it's like almost blue-black.
Really?
Yeah. So I wonder, like, would it be a different set of optimal parameters for this tomato?
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's definitely producing different compounds. That's how you get the blue-black component. Mm-hmm. Probably like anthocyanins. You can go for that one after.
Okay, I'll bring you one. You can try it.
Okay, that sounds great.
People stop and take pictures of my garden because of these crazy tomatoes I grow. Yeah.
That's cool.
Anyway.
This is awesome. Thank you for having me. And I just, I'm really cool that you are interested in plants, the intersection with AI and machine learning, reinforcement learning, all these things. So hopefully this may inspire some people out there in the world to go and explore the space themselves.
Well, we're excited that you're working on that intersection because we need people like you.
Oh, well, thanks.
So great episode. But what's really important is the pink tomatoes that are being thrust upon us now in the middle of winter. And has Glen fixed it yet?
Yes. Glen, please fix our national nightmare.
Our national nightmare. The tomatoes. No one can have a good sandwich. Hamburgers are atrocious this time of year. Why would you even bother? Why are they pink? They taste like nothing and also taste bad.
I don't know if I've ever seen you so passionate about something.
I have a lot of passions. One of those tomatoes, and we'll keep learning more about me as we keep recording these episodes.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm Alona Fyshe.
I'm Scott Lilwall.
And this has been Approximately Correct. Approximately tomatoes. That's the problem. They're approximately tomatoes, but they aren't tomatoes.